So, hello and welcome to On the Right Track Career Stories, a video series and podcast about real people, their real lives, and real careers. I'm Jane Christopher, your host, and today we've got Simone Starr. She's an award-winning Canadian film director and writer. I hope you'll enjoy her story. So, Simone, tell us what you do.
Hi. Well, as you say, I like to hear award-winning. That always sounds nice. But I'm a writer and a director. So I often tell people when they say, what does that really mean? It means I'm chronically unemployed and I'm constantly looking for work because it's a freelance gig. But being a writer-director means when I'm not directing, which is a lot of the time, I'm writing and I'm creating my own projects. So that's developing a story or working on a story with somebody else. But when I'm directing, it's often other people's work right now. So it's television that you might watch here in Canada or a digital series that you can find online where I'm taking someone else's script and I'm basically bringing it to life.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about how you got here?
Yeah, it's funny. It's all I ever wanted to do. I remember seeing plays with my parents when I was younger and even just watching TV and movies thinking, how do you do that? There was nothing else that really held my attention. And my mother was a teacher and was very keen for me to be a teacher and thought that I would be a good one. And I'm not sure I disagree. But it really wasn't what made my heart sing. But I didn't know what to do about that. And so I always joke she made me go to the University of Toronto. And so I did. I didn't go to the university of my choosing, which at the time would have been Ryerson. And I started on this double specialist of cinema studies and English. I didn't even know what cinema studies meant at the time. Like I knew it meant movies, but I thought for sure we'd get to make movies. There was only one course in the hundreds of them that they offered that we did that. And I did that very late in my academic career. And it was only then that the real light went on. And I went, oh, I love this. Like it was astronomically hard. We had no support, no money. Nobody taught us how to do anything, like how to load the cameras or anything. But I loved figuring it out. And I realized that I loved it. And that's what I should probably keep doing. But it was hard to find a job because if there was Toronto kind of film infrastructure at the time, I had no clue how to access it. And so I got a job working at a hair salon to pay my bills because I had just moved out. And I hated it. They were nice people, but the work was just not for me. And so I got fired, which was probably the best thing that could have happened. Not because I was doing a bad job. But they were downsizing. And I was feeling very sorry for myself at a party when a friend said that he had a job working as a caterer for a film company. And he said, I got to quit this job to take, of all things, a teaching job. And he said, I don't know what to do. I'm like, dude, can I take your job? I knew nothing about food.
Okay, what stage were you at here, Simone? Were you finished at U of T with your
No,
undergraduate was done?
I could never afford to go full time. I always went part time and had a handful of jobs. I pumped gas. I worked at this hair salon. I did a bunch of stuff. So I still had a handful of jobs at the time, and I was still going to school part-time. So once I started this job at a company called Catering by David's, I couldn't really manage school. So I put finishing my degree on the back burner for about 5 years. I went back and finished it ultimately, though, and started working on film sets, bringing all this food that I would prepare in a kitchen with chefs who showed us how to do it, basically. And you couldn't take me away from the set as soon as lunch was served. I generally didn't want to leave. And my boss was a really lovely guy and saw that I worked to death. I completely understood that the boss was always right. The customer was always right. You could never work hard enough. And so he helped me get my first job working on movies as what's called a production assistant. You get lunches, you get dry cleaning, you do what people tell you to do, you wash coffee cups. And I always remember working with a girl who said, I went to Western and I got a degree and I'm above all this. I should be doing more. And I thought that had just never occurred to me. I was just happy to be there. And I thought, oh, should we be doing more? Like what? And so I asked her, like, what should we be doing? Like, tell me more. And she said, oh, we should be working on big features. And I thought, oh, okay, well, how the hell do you do that? And so I started trying to figure out how to do that. How could I stop working on what were then movies of the week? That we wouldn't have even seen here in Canada and start working on the big features that were starting up in Toronto. And eventually I met somebody. I had gone to a payroll company to drop off lunch for somebody. And the other person standing in line and said, oh, I'm working on this feature film. I said, well, how could I get a job on that? So it was really just luck and serendipity as much as anything. But it was because it was in my heart what I wanted to do. So there was no like master plan that ever got fulfilled, although I sort of feel like that now. But it
Hmm.
was just kind of being dogged and not giving up about the thing I really wanted to do, and
Hmm.
never being worried that the job was not up to my standards or somebody else's idea of standards.
Okay, tell us what happened when you met that person you delivered lunch to. What did you do?
She said, well, what do you do? I said, I'm a production assistant and I'm looking to work on features as an assistant. And she said, oh, do you have a resume? And I happened to have one in my car because I was just doing it up to try to figure out how to make my next move. And I said, I got one in my car. Can you hang on? She said, sure. Ran out, got it, gave it to her. And within a week, she called me and said, could you come and interview to be an assistant?
Yeah. So you made a good impression on her and you had something for her at the
I
same
think
time.
so. I think because I was just so keen.
Yeah.
And when she had said, oh, this is what I do, my attitude was, oh, really? I want to do that too. I was never, ever too good for anything. And I think that's probably helped me a lot.
What happened next?
Well, then I started working for first-time directors on pretty big Hollywood films. And I had met a lot of movie stars by that point. I'd met Bruce Dern, Antonio Banderas, all these really big guys who were really nice, overwhelmingly very charming people, and some really powerful producers at the time. And I started to realize, oh, they're just regular people doing a job. So when I started working for people like that, I think one of the things that let me succeed was I felt at ease. I didn't feel intimidated or worried.
Hmm.
It's so funny. I did so many different things. I helped with budgetary things. I still bought the lunches. I did grocery shopping. I would buy their kids birthday presents, arrange their kids' birthday parties. But then I would also read 5 or 6 other scripts that were like the movie we're making to see how they were different. So all the skills I had came to bear, and no two jobs was quite the same. So I worked for directors first and really learned what all of the jobs were on a movie and what the expectations of each of the departments was and what the expectations of my bosses were. Because they were doing it for the first time, they often didn't know themselves and
Hmm.
would often turn to me and say, well, what do you think I should do? Which when I think about it now is such a privilege to get to be with someone at their most vulnerable and most powerful at the same time and watch
Yeah.
them make all the decisions.
Hmm.
But then I started to see that there were other assisting jobs where I might learn more. So I worked for producers with whom there was always this sort of like a acrimonious relationship with the director often, because it's the producers who decide how many resources you get. How many days do you shoot? How much money do you have? Who are the actors that you should cast? So I was curious, why is this always such an unpleasant, or often anyway, such an unpleasant relationship? So it was nice to see both sides of the story.
Yeah.
But I started to realize actors were the easiest people to work for because the work that they did was just the work of one facet of the film. As big as it was only one. And as I started to realize I want to write my own movies and I want to direct my own movies, I need time to do that. Assisting people who had kind of less requirements started to become easier, but it also let the profile go up. So I worked for Vin Diesel and Anne Bancroft and Liam Neeson on these pretty big films
Yeah.
where I really got a window on the scope and scale of like a bigger Hollywood production and what the stakes are.
Okay. Talk about your lifestyle, your hours.
Oh, well,
What was expected of you time wise? Could you have a personal life?
not really. To be honest, the every single one of these jobs was a minimum 12-hour day. That was a short day if you started at 6 and you finished at 7. Um, so it was you have to drop everything if your boss calls and needs anything. And I remember being at a girlfriend's place on a Saturday, and a boss contacted me and said, could you please go to the pharmacy right across the street from his hotel to get cough medicine and walk it across the street? And I just said, yes, of course, I'll be right over. It'll take me 30 minutes. And she looked at me like I was insane.
Hmm.
Like, why are you doing that for him? That's so silly that he can't go do it himself. And I said, no. The contract here is that I just do what he asks me to do. And so I'm more than happy to do it. And it never occurred to me really that this was impinging upon my social life. I really didn't care too much. And to be honest, I've been with my husband since I was that age. We've
Hmm.
been together since I was probably 20. And he did the same thing. So anytime we had a romantic anything planned and it got thwarted by a boss, we understood. It never negatively impacted us, really.
Hmm.
I think I always call people that don't work in the film business civilians. I think when people in my business have relationships with people outside the business, it is difficult to understand because the demands are ludicrous, really. But if you love it, I don't think that's your relationship to it.
Now, what happens when one film wraps up? Do you have another waiting? Do you have a
If
few?
you're lucky. So it sort of depends on what you do. If you're a member of the crew, you're often working for the production manager or the producer, and they often know what's coming down the pipe, or they have another job lined up and they'll hire you on it. But just as often, you're not working
Hmm.
for a month, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And then when you're at the stage I'm at now as a director, uh, sometimes you're working once or twice a year.
Okay. So that's when you can do things such as take a trip to Europe or
Definitely.
something like that, but it needs to be in sync with your loved ones.
It does. It does indeed.
How did you get to where you are now? You talked a bit about the early stages in your career. You're now, calling the shots as director and writer. So how'd you get there?
It sounds a little simplistic. I kind of just started. There was a point at which I kept thinking someone was going to say to me, "Oh, Simone, because you want to be a director, you are going to get the chance." And I think it's in part because there's a lot of Hollywood stories for men where that's true. A director I really admire named Richard Donner tried first to be an actor, and he worked with this great director producer who said, "Oh, you should be a director. Would you basically like to try doing it?" And kind of started directing television that way. And I think I dreamed that could happen for me, and I had no idea that that was never going to happen for a woman at all. Um, I had no idea that it just simply wasn't going to happen. So I remember thinking, if I don't start writing my own stories, I'm never going to direct anything. There's never, nothing is going to come to me. And it started to become obvious that the other directors I admired were more self-starters. They figured out how to make their first film. So that's what I started to do. I started writing short films and getting my friends together and making them. But the mistake I made at the outset was never really showing them. I didn't send them to as many festivals. I didn't think that was as important. And I realize now, if you want to have a career, you have to show your work. People have to know what you're capable of. So I slowly started to figure that out.
Marketing yourself.
Well, just getting exposure as much as anything else. Because there's a short film that I made called Iris that now lots of people have seen, and I'm grateful for that. And it screened at Cannes and has been at a lot of big festivals. If I had chosen not to share that with anybody, nobody would know, and nobody would know what I was capable of. So even in a job interview situation, "Oh, Simone, what do you do?" "Well, this is a film that I made." "Oh, okay, fine. I understand
Hmm.
kind of what's important to you,
Yeah.
and what you're capable of as a director." So it's important to show your work. And if you're shy about it, you really do have to get over that. And I was.
Hmm. Okay, talk to us a little bit about your high school years. What were you
So
like? Were you involved in school? Did you get involved in film or musicals or anything? Drama club?
musicals, yes. Drama, yes. I did 2 years at a regular high school, a Catholic high school in the West End. Um, but it was not for me. I was really, really miserable. And I don't think I understood the degree of my misery, but I failed typing in gym in grade 9. Um, and I was a smart kid. So I think even to myself, this seemed like a red flag. So I chose to go to an alternative school instead, where I designed a lot of the curriculum myself. The classes were smaller. It was really kind of funky,
Hmm.
but still very academically driven, which was kind of the perfect union for me. And so I did really well
Yeah.
as a consequence. But we didn't really have a drama program in the traditional sense, but we
Hmm.
did have a really robust media program because it was such a progressive school. So
Right.
we had cameras and we were encouraged to make films. So pretty early on, we got a bit of a window on, oh, so if you want to put this shot next to this shot, you need to have connective tissue. Or so it really I started to wake up to the fact that I was probably good at telling stories, but also good at running the floor, being the boss, basically, because you have to facilitate everybody else's aptitudes and skills in the best way possible. And I like doing that.
Hmm.
And that's when I figured it out. But
Okay.
I wouldn't want to go back to high school for all the tea in China. It's hard.
It
It's
is
a
a
hard time.
very interesting time of life for sure. Okay, so what did you know was not for you when you were a teenager?
Anything behind a desk, anything in the same place, anything with the same people all the time.
Hmm.
Like if I couldn't do this, I'd probably join a circus. I like the sameness, not for me. And
Hmm.
if I couldn't author what I was doing in some meaningful way, I didn't want to do it. Because even as an assistant, where I'm saying I did all these kind of little Joe jobs for people, I was still deciding how I did it, when I did it. I was just given a deadline and an objective.
Hmm.
go ahead and manifest that in any way possible. And sometimes it was enormously difficult, so I could apply all my skills. If I was asked to sit and do, I don't know, like accounting, I would die. I would not be able to survive. I
Hmm.
really don't think. So I was glad to have a lot of different part-time jobs. I worked in real estate very, very briefly behind a desk, and I learned, man, oh man, I can't do this. I
Hmm.
just don't want to do this, but knew enough to stick it out at the
Hmm.
time to make the money to get through it.
Yeah,
So having a variety of kind of tryouts in different jobs was useful.
absolutely. Okay, what is the thing that surprised you most about the film industry? Something you weren't expecting.
Well, I guess two things: that it's deeply collaborative and a lot of fun as a consequence. You really have to rely on the strengths and skills of all of your coworkers. I think there's often this vision of a director of calling shots, as you said, where it's this one sort of unilateral vision and you're the boss of everything. And we get those ideas from directors like Stanley Kubrick, but more often than not, it's a constellation of ideas all coming together to make it all happen as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So that part of it, I totally knew nothing about and love. But I also didn't know how deeply sexist it was when I started, and
Hmm.
in many ways continues to be, and it's changing.
Yeah.
But growing up when I did, feminism was a big deal. Women were believed to have equal opportunity and equal access, and I suppose in many ways it was true. But I still came up at a time where men of a certain age would call the script supervisor the script girl,
Hmm.
and camera operators were the cameraman, and there was just no expectation that women would do certain jobs ever. And
Hmm.
it continues, and it's hard to it's hard it's hard to navigate because uh, I think overwhelmingly as directors, um, it's not a meritocracy. It's like so many jobs, it's who you know, it's are you in the right place at the right time. But just being good often isn't good enough, and in a way it seems like it might be discouraging, but I think really it just forces you to be a better artist and forces you to work harder and say, well, I'm this good now, you can't say no.
Hmm.
So it's made me more determined, I suppose.
Tell students out there who are viewing who want to be award-winning film directors at the festivals, what should they do in this day and age? You have an interesting story, but it's got to be different for kids
Well,
today.
I think it's funny now. There's like film schools all over the place, and there's endless books on how to write a screenplay, how to break into the industry.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, on the one hand, I think just throw it all out and like don't listen to any of that and do your thing. But the fact is, I read all that stuff too. So I think having a voracious appetite for other people's work is number one. Like, watch tons of movies. I'm
Mhm.
honestly astonished when I meet younger people who want to work in the business and they haven't seen kind of like basic classic
Mhm.
films. And I think, well, people are young, but then I do meet people who are 25 who have this more robust knowledge of what kind of the canon is and what the important films are. So I think just really, if you want to do this, I think it's important to want to do it because you really love it, not because it seems cool, not to be judgmental in any way, because it is really hard.
Yeah.
Um, so I think just being a big fan of the thing that you want to do,
Mhm.
um, and be determined and dogged about it, but be willing to learn. Uh, I think without kind of that up close and personal access that I had when I was a personal assistant, I wouldn't know so many of the things that I do now, and I wouldn't have such a rich experience pool to draw from.
Mhm.
There are lots of situations I haven't encountered professionally yet as a director, but I've watched countless other directors go through them and
Mhm.
kind of lived with them as it happened. So I think just trying to get a bird's eye view on other people doing it is ideal if you can.
Mhm.
But read all the books, take all the courses. It really doesn't hurt, not at
Mhm.
all.
Okay. Now, what general skill for this day and age would you advise students to develop? What is the most important skill you see for today in any
Mm.
industry in the world,
Yeah.
launching into the world?
Well, I guess a willingness not to settle. Like this is the best I could do. Oh, I couldn't. This is the best that we could do. Push it a little further. You always can. There's always that tiny bit more, kind of like just go for excellence in whatever it is. If
Mm-hmm.
it's just listening quietly in the meeting, if it's get this to the place on time, don't let anything thwart you. I don't know if that makes sense exactly, but a kind of a pursuit of excellence and a doggedness about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think you
Love it.
have to have, no matter what the heck you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think in many, I think I listened to, it's funny, I used to, the biggest decisions I've made, I imagined myself as an old woman looking back and saying, what do I think that? And so I kept kind of using that as a tool. So times when I felt discouraged and felt like giving up and wondered, should I really do something else? Did the universe, God, whatever, intend for me to do something else? I never felt like the answer was yes. Looking back, I'm glad I never gave up. But don't lose hope. Don't lose faith in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It is going to work out. And no matter how apocalyptically bad it looks now, there's probably a plan. And this is part of it. So just pick up the pieces and keep going and don't worry. It is going to work out.
I love it. That's great advice. Okay, so last question for the day. Um, what would you be doing if you weren't Simone Stock, the award-winning Canadian film director and
Would
writer?
be in the circus. I'm
Yes,
positive
you did say that already.
I would. I don't know. I don't know. It would be touring around doing stuff, maybe theater, doing plays, probably making even less money, but loving it just as much.
Love it. Okay, well, this has been a great conversation. So fun to see you and hear your
You too.
story.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simone Stock, and thanks for sharing your insights, your experience, and your tips.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you liked the video, give us a like, and even better, subscribe. For more information, check out the links below. You'll get lots of scoop about other social media platforms, more information about our interview guests, and the services available from Right Track Education. Have a great day and best wishes to everyone.